The planet Tarvis Prime burned, silently, solemnly. Zalora stood alone at the edge of the shattered city. Her obsidian-black war armor glistened faintly beneath the sickly amber glow of a dying sun, its light barely penetrating the drifting ash that hung like funeral veils in the air. The atmosphere was thick with the acrid scent of scorched ozone and vaporized metal, each breath a reminder of the destruction wrought from above. The aftermath of the orbital bombardment lingered like a phantom, unseen, but omnipresent. Around her, the skeleton of a once proud civilization lay in ruin. Towers that had once scraped the sky now jutted like broken teeth from the earth. The streets, choked with debris, bore the charred remains of history, collapsed domes, shattered monuments, the twisted wreckage of lives erased in moments. Occasionally, her eyes would catch a defiant scrawl of graffiti, etched in haste, messages of rebellion or prayer from those who had known the end was near. Zalora had seen this before. Too many times. The silence was not new to her, but it had a different weight now. Heavier. More final. Every world she had conquered eventually ended like this, in fire, in fear, in whispers of her name that traveled like ghost stories across galaxies. This desolation, was her legacy. She did not flinch at the memory. But neither did she revel in it. Not anymore. Fear had always been the final, inevitable outcome. Civilizations crumbled. Species surrendered. Planets fell. And through it all, her name remained, a myth cloaked in terror, a warning passed from mother to child in the dark. Zalora turned from the ruins, her reflection flickering in a pool of molten glass where a plaza once stood. Her next conquest waited beyond the stars, but something in her footsteps felt slower now. Tarvis Prime had burned without a scream. And somehow, that silence was louder than any cry. She had left another world in ruins. It was an unbreakable cycle, a grim law etched into the fabric of her empire. Civilizations rose, dared to dream, then collapsed beneath the heel of the Scythe Dominion. And always, Zalora moved on. Ruthless. Unrelenting. Victorious. And yet, her crimson eyes narrowed as she surveyed the line of survivors kneeling in the ash before her. Shackled refugees. Defeated diplomats. Broken warriors. Their faces were smudged with soot, eyes sunken, shoulders sagging with the weight of loss. None dared look up. All except one. A man. Human. Zalora's brow creased slightly. He stood amid the captives, hands casually tucked into the tattered pockets of a flight jacket streaked with grime and blood. His posture was relaxed, almost nonchalant, completely at odds with the wreckage around him. Though lean, he held himself with the ease of someone who had danced with death and come away bored. His face was scratched, dust-covered, tired, but not afraid. In that expression, amusement. Amusement? Zalora's armored boots struck the scorched ground with sharp, deliberate echoes as she closed the distance. Her warlords stiffened at her sides, tension bleeding into their stances. An execution was expected. Routine. This human should have been screaming. Pleading. Groveling. Instead, he looked like he was waiting for a late train. "Why aren't you afraid, human?" she asked, her voice as sharp and cold as a blade unsheathed in the dark, low, lethal, and used to breaking empires. The man tilted his head slightly, as if puzzled by the question. He looked around, confirming that yes, this godlike conqueror had indeed addressed him. Then he nodded to himself. "Well, for one, I've had worse Mondays." A beat of silence fell. Heavy. Confused. Then, growling. One of her lieutenants, a massive brute swathed in jagged cybernetics, snarled like a beast denied its prey. "He mocks you, Supreme One. Shall I tear him apart?" The human held up his hands, still somehow calm. "Whoa there, big guy. No need to get stabby. You've got biceps the size of small moons. I've got a paper cut. Seems unfair, don't you think?" Zalora's eye twitched. "You are standing before the supreme warlord of the Scythe Dominion," she said, each word etched with command. "You should be on your knees." He glanced down, then raised his eyebrows. Yeah, see, kneeling's not really my thing. Bad for the spine. I do yoga. A pulse of energy snapped from Zalora's gauntlet, the air around her hand crackling with violent, violet light. The ground beneath her boots shimmered, scorched further by her growing ire. It wasn't a warning. It was instinct. Every ruler, rebel, and wretched soul across the stars feared her. But this one? He just sighed, brushing ash from his shoulder. Look, I get it. You've got the whole Galactic Empress of Doom vibe going on. Super intense. Very murder chic. Honestly? 10 out of 10 for style. He shrugged. But fear? Kinda overrated. The warlord beside her lunged a step forward, armor grinding in protest. You insult her with every breath, worm. Do you not understand your place? The man scratched his chin thoughtfully. Let's see. I'm standing in a crater, surrounded by terrifying death machines, talking to a glowing space queen who could vaporize me with a raised eyebrow. He nodded. Yeah, pretty clear on my place. Zalora's gauntlet clenched tighter. And yet, she didn't strike. There was something gnawing at the edges of her control. Not rage. Not even contempt. Curiosity. A flicker of something long dormant. She stepped forward until they were only a breath apart. Her voice dropped to a whisper edged with danger and wonder. What is your name, human? He gave her a lazy two-fingered salute, smiling through the dust. Captain Elias Vance. Pleasure to meet you. She studied him. No armor. No army. No fear. You are either the bravest, she said, her words slow and deliberate, or the most foolish creature I have ever encountered, Captain Elias Vance. His grin widened. Honestly? Bit of both. He smirked. Why not both? The boldness of the reply hit like a seismic wave. Around him, the warlords, battle-hardened monsters of metal, bone, and war, shifted in disbelief. They had witnessed the pleading of monarchs, the sobbing of planetary chancellors, the desperate bargaining of species on the brink. Fear. Submission. Silence. But this? This was irreverence. Unyielding, audacious irreverence. Zalora exhaled slowly, a breath that felt heavier than the collapsing world behind her. With a single gesture, she could end him, reduce the man to carbon and memory. She had extinguished star systems for less. Her wrath was not merely a force of nature, it was doctrine. Cosmic law made flesh. And yet, she hesitated. That was new. Take him to the flagship, she ordered at last, her voice composed, unreadable. I will deal with him, personally. The air stilled. None of the warlords questioned her, not out of respect, but because none of them dared. A command from Zalora was final, eternal, unquestionable. But Vance? He whistled. Oof. Personally, huh? Normally I'd be flattered when a woman takes an interest in me, but I get the sense this is gonna be more torture dungeon than candlelit dinner. Zalora turned without a word, her dark cape sweeping behind her like a slash of shadow, and strode toward her vessel, the Doombringer. The name was not poetic. It was prophecy. More than a ship, the Doombringer was a floating cathedral of war, an obsidian leviathan stretching nearly 20 kilometers long, its sleek hull bristling with ion lances, singularity torpedoes, and planet-rending plasma rays. It had no windows. No vulnerability. Only the black sheen of death incarnate. It orbited above every conquest like a silent reaper. Prisoners who entered never returned. And that was exactly why it was so troubling that Captain Elias Vance, hands bound in glowing Zelth restrainment cuffs, was currently whistling. The cuffs were masterworks of alien engineering, adapting to his every muscle twitch and neural spark. Escape was a statistical impossibility. Movement, other than walking, was surgically restricted. Still, he strolled as if he were touring an art gallery. Nice digs, he murmured, eyeing the walls of the corridor. They pulsed with dark red circuitry, throbbing like veins through the metal hide of a sleeping giant. Gotta hand it to you guys, malevolent space overlord isn't just an aesthetic. It's a lifestyle. You've really committed. Beside him marched General Kavara, a towering Zealoth warrior clad in segmented armor laced with crimson energy filaments. The general snarled. You mock the Supreme One's sanctum, human. Vance raised a brow, utterly unfazed. Mock? No, this is admiration. Creepy ambient lighting, endless corridors, no safety railings? It's like walking through a haunted spaceship designed by a goth architect with a death wish. Throw in a few potted plants, maybe a jazz trio? Boom. Inviting. Kavara's eyelid twitched, his deep-set crimson eyes glowing faintly. You are insufferable. Thanks, Vance said brightly. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all day. Kavara growled deep in his throat but kept moving. The general had been ordered to deliver the prisoner intact, and while he could fantasize about silencing the human, defying Zalora's wishes was a death sentence far more immediate. They descended deeper into the ship's core, passing through shimmering force fields and layers of containment zones that could withstand a black hole. At last, they arrived at the central detention level, a cavernous chamber bathed in the pale shimmer of containment fields. Cells hovered in anti-grav stacks, each housing prisoners from dozens, no, hundreds, of fallen worlds. The silence inside was sacred. It was the silence of despair. Until now. As Vance was led in, the silence broke like glass. A reptilian prisoner hissed, nudging the creature beside him. Hey! Look! It's the human. The crazy one. Another leaned forward. The one who mouthed off to the Empress and lived? Vance offered a cheery wave with his cuffed hands. Hi. Yes. That would be me. Elias Vance, Captain. Professional smartass. Connoisseur of bad decisions. A low murmur spread like wildfire through the cells. In a place where legends died, a new one was being whispered. The man who made the Doombringer laugh. It's that human, one prisoner whispered, barely loud enough to be heard above the low hum of containment fields. The one who laughed at the Supreme One. No way, another muttered, eyes wide. No one laughs at her and lives. But there he was. Captain Elias Vance gave the crowded rows of imprisoned rebels, diplomats, and warriors a casual nod, hands still bound by glowing restraint cuffs. Hey, fellas. Love what you've done with the place. Though, still no plants. Bit of a theme, huh? No one laughed. Their silence wasn't rudeness, it was reverence. Or fear. Tough crowd, he muttered to himself. Before he could comment further on the soul-sucking lack of feng shui in galactic prison architecture, General Kavara shoved him forward. He stumbled into an empty containment cell. A hiss of energy surged as the force field activated around him with a crisp zed, the sci-fi equivalent of a steel door slamming shut. You will wait, Kavara growled. The Supreme One will summon you when she decides how to dispose of you. Vance shrugged, utterly unbothered. Neat. Hope she's not keeping me waiting for dinner. I get real cranky on an empty stomach. Very bad for morale. The general growled deep in his throat, his fangs grinding with undisguised frustration. He stormed off without another word. Vance flopped down onto the cell's unforgiving metal bench, stretching his legs like he was settling into a hotel lobby instead of one of the most feared detention blocks in the galaxy. Welp, he muttered, guess I should get comfortable. That's when he noticed it, a black sphere, hovering just beyond the force field. Sleek, silent, and watching. Its single optic glowed a dim violet, flickering like a heartbeat. Well, aren't you just adorable, Vance murmured, leaning forward. The probe whirred softly, drifting closer, scanning him with a fan of scanning light across his chest and face. What's your name, buddy? Vance grinned. The probe didn't answer, but its eye pulsed faster. He snapped his fingers. Okay. I'm gonna call you Beep Boop. The probe jerked slightly, the faintest twitch of indignation in its movement. Vance raised his eyebrows. Oh? Hit a nerve, did I? The eye pulsed again. This time, a voice emerged, flat, mechanical, and unimpressed. Designated Unit, X-17. Overseer of Organic Detainees. Vance nodded solemnly. Huh. See, that's your problem. No personality. X-17 sounds like a toaster with a superiority complex. Beep boop's got flair. X-17 hovered closer. You are unafraid. Vance shrugged. Fear's exhausting. You ever try being terrified 24/7? It's a full-time job. Sarcasm's easier. Funnier, too. The probe was silent for a beat. Then, softly, it beeped. Not a cold mechanical response, but something else. A thoughtful sound. Tentative. Curious. And somewhere deep within the neural net of its programming, X-17 ran a new subroutine. What happens when a prisoner doesn't fear? Far above, on the command deck of the Doombringer, Supreme Warlord Zalora sat in her obsidian throne, surrounded by the soft glow of tactical projections and transmission feeds. Her empire pulsed around her, millions of warships, thousands of conquered systems, entire star charts rewritten in her name. And yet, her thoughts were elsewhere. On him. The human. He had defied the unspoken rule of the galaxy, no one mocked her and survived. It wasn't just gall, it was impossible. She tapped her fingers against the armrest, the sound sharp in the otherwise silent chamber. Her mind cycled through possibilities. Was he insane? Genetically tampered? Some rogue experiment? Or had she finally stumbled across something even more rare? A true anomaly. A voice broke the silence. My Supreme One, rumbled Korak, stepping forward with a low bow. The human is secured. He remains, irreverent. Her fingers stopped tapping. Summon him, she said. Her voice was calm. Final. I will have my answers. Korak bowed deeper, then vanished into the shadows. She remained still, though her grip on the throne tightened ever so slightly. Because despite everything, despite centuries of conquests, despite the untouchable aura she had built from blood and fire and legend, she was curious. And curiosity, she knew, was dangerous. The interrogation chamber was built to crush kings. A vast circular space, dimly lit, with jagged conduits lining the walls, each one humming with unstable energy, feeding power into the neural destabilizers above. The air was dense with tension, laced with ozone and history. No one left this room unchanged. Most didn't leave at all. In the center hovered a single grav chair, suspended weightlessly just above the cold obsidian floor. A place of suffering. Of surrender. Captain Elias Vance was lounging in it. Arms slung lazily across the back. Boots propped up in open defiance of gravity. Rocking slightly with the movement of the ship. As if he were waiting for a drink, not judgment. He looked completely at ease. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Vance leaned back in the grav chair like it was the galactic equivalent of a hammock, lazily examining the flickering conduits above. Quick question, he said, tone breezy. Do all interrogation rooms in the Zelf Dominion come standard with this much moody lighting, or is this just the VIP package? From the shadows, Supreme Warlord Zalora stepped forward. She had been watching him silently for several minutes, cloaked by the dark projection field that veiled the observation deck. She'd expected fear, maybe even a show of courage. What she hadn't expected was this. Irreverence. Complete and utter disregard for his situation. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't madness. It was something stranger. The only sound was the hum of the restraints suspending in midair. Her crimson eyes narrowed, sharp and assessing. You are an anomaly, human, she said at last, her voice low and smooth. Vance turned his head toward her, feigning surprise. Whoa! Didn't see you there. You should really get a bell, or better yet, a dramatic theme song. Something orchestral. Maybe some ominous drums. You deserve an entrance. Zalora's fingers twitched. He was mocking her, again, and yet, her anger didn't rise like it should have. You misunderstand your position, she said coolly, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. You are a prisoner aboard my warship. My domain. And yet you speak as though this is an awkward first date. Vance smirked. Yeah, I get that a lot. Although most of my actual dates end with awkward small talk about space taxes, not so many death threats. For a moment, Zalora didn't respond. Her mind churned through centuries of conflict, of executions, of dominion carved from the bones of resistance. She had seen defiance before. She had crushed it. But this man, this Elias Vance, he wielded sarcasm like a blade, a strange kind of armor no one had ever dared wear in her presence. She stepped closer, her gaze burning. Do you believe I will not harm you? Vance tilted his head. Oh, I'm absolutely certain you could turn me into a fine red mist with a flick of your wrist. He leaned back again, the grav chair rocking gently. But that's not the point, is it? Zalora stilled. Then what is? He shrugged. Fear's just a tool. Effective, until it's not. You've built an empire on terror. On being the shadow that makes stars shiver. But all it takes is one person who isn't afraid, and everything you built starts to crack. Her eyes flashed. You believe you are that person? He offered a half grin. I dunno. Maybe I'm just an idiot with boundary issues. She stared at him. And then, with a flick of her fingers, she activated a control panel. A shimmering wall of light surged to life, revealing a hollow projection that filled the chamber, Tarvis Prime. Once a thriving world. Now a burning ruin. Its skies were choked with ash. Its oceans boiled. Its cities, those not already crumbling, screamed beneath the barrage of orbital strikes. The sound was silent, but the horror was vivid. Does this impress you? Zalora asked, her voice a velvet razor. You should be horrified. Vance studied it for a long moment, then rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Yeah, see, that's where you lose me. He turned his gaze back to her. The humor was gone now, replaced by something quieter. Sharper. If you actually knew anything about humans, he said, you'd realize this is basically a Tuesday. A flicker of something, real confusion, crossed her face. He sat up slightly, and his voice dropped lower. Not mocking. Not playful. But heavy with an uncomfortable truth. Humans kill entire species for sport. We invent weapons powerful enough to crack planets, not because we need them, but because we want to know we could. We've waged wars over skin color, ideology, and whose invisible sky god wins the popularity contest. He leaned in just a little closer, his gaze hard. We get bored of peace. Zalora didn't speak. Couldn't, perhaps. You want to know if I'm afraid of you? Vance said, voice calm now, almost gentle. I'm not. But here's a better question. He smiled. Should you be afraid of us? The chamber fell into silence. Zalora's gauntlet fingers curled tight around the edge of the console. You are lying. Vance chuckled, softly. Oh. I wish. She deactivated the hologram with a sharp gesture. The devastation of Tarvis Prime had brought entire civilizations to their knees. It had shattered alliances. Broken resistance cells across 5 sectors. And to him, it was a story. A memory. A warning he didn't flinch from. For the first time in centuries, she felt something she hadn't known she could feel anymore. Uncertainty. Return him to his cell, she said, her voice low and precise. At the chamber's entrance, General Kavara stepped forward. Shall we begin neural destabilization protocols, Supreme One? It was standard procedure. Every defiant prisoner had faced it. And every one of them had broken. Zalora hesitated. Her gaze lingered on Vance. He grinned at her. And though she couldn't explain it, she said, no. Kavara blinked. Supreme One? Leave him as he is. She turned, her cloak whispering behind her like a storm held in check. And as she left the chamber, she felt something rare coil at the edge of her mind. Doubt. She tried to ignore the voice. That quiet, insistent whisper at the back of her mind. The one that suggested, for the first time in centuries, she'd met someone truly dangerous. Not because he had weapons. Not because he had power. But because Elias Vance refused to be afraid. He didn't resist like the others had. Didn't scream or posture. He simply leaned into the storm with a crooked smile and a half-sarcastic remark, like he'd seen worse and lived to make jokes about it. That made him unpredictable. That made him contagious. Vance, meanwhile, had been on a lot of ships in his time, most of them disasters in slow motion. He'd once ridden a cargo freighter that smelled like engine grease, expired protein bars, and bad life choices. He'd served on a military cruiser for a week and a half before realizing the chain of command was more dysfunctional than the ship's plumbing. He'd even taken a pleasure yacht job once. That one ended with a bar fight, a shattered chandelier, and a very confused wedding party. But the Doombringer? This ship was something else entirely. The corridors were cathedral-high, carved from obsidian alloys and laced with veins of pulsing crimson energy that throbbed like the lifeblood of some enormous, sleeping beast. It didn't just look ominous, it felt alive. The walls swallowed sound. Every footstep echoed like a countdown. And the guards? Built like sentient refrigerators and twice as warm. Always watching. Always tense. As if waiting for someone to give them permission to break something. Yet despite all that, Vance couldn't shake the feeling that the Doombringer was off. Not broken. Not malfunctioning. Just uncertain. The whispers were there, small and soft and strange. Not defiant. Not yet. But curious. Watching. Guards shot each other furtive glances as he passed. Engineers paused just a second longer than they should when he walked by. The ever-present AI probes, supposedly emotionless watchers of the Supreme One's will, hovered closer, longer. As if studying him. Something was shifting. And he wasn't sure if Salora had noticed yet. Back in his cell, a metal box with all the charm of a condemned bank vault, Vance leaned against the wall, arms folded as he regarded the hovering probe that had been assigned to him. X-17. Or as Vance preferred to call it, Beep Boop. Heya, BB, Vance said with a lazy grin. Good day so far? Do anything exciting, or just another shift of casual authoritarianism and casual war crimes? The probe let out a sharp electronic chirp. My function is to monitor detainees. Your status remains unchanged. Right. Because if anything changed, someone might have to fill out a report, Vance said, yawning. So tell me honestly, how many folks have come by asking about me? The probe paused a beat too long. Your inquiry is irrelevant. Vance's grin widened. Ah. So at least 3, then. The probe buzzed again, quieter this time. He was right. He wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He was a question. An anomaly. A ripple in the surface of an empire built on silence and fear. And in a place like this, even a ripple could become a wave. In her command chamber, Salora stood staring at the status feeds projected before her. Columns of data scrolled past, fleet formations, sector reports, planetary compliance indexes. But she wasn't seeing them. Her mind was still in that cell. Still on him. 3 days had passed since she'd returned the human to his cell, certain, calculating, that time alone would break him. That without her presence, without pressure, he would fracture. But he hadn't fractured. He'd settled in. She had reviewed the surveillance herself. The footage showed a man who had not unraveled, but grown more confident. Relaxed. Comfortable. And worse, so had the crew. A soldier in the lower barracks had been overheard repeating one of his jokes. A junior officer had made a comment, half in jest, half not, about installing plants in the halls to make things less murdery. There had even been a complaint filed about the lack of safety railings near the ion conduits, quoting the human's exact phrasing. Small things. Harmless things. But order was not lost in firestorms, it died in whispers. She had built this empire on structure. On fear. On control. And now, something in its foundations was shifting. She could feel it. And it all started with him. This ends now. She descended into the lower decks herself, her cloak flowing behind her like liquid shadow. Guards parted silently as she passed, their eyes averted, their steps precise. The cell doors opened with a hiss of vacuum-sealed menace. Vance didn't even look up right away. "Oh hey," he said with a sigh. "Checking to see if I've cracked yet? Hate to disappoint, but I'm still frustratingly intact." Zalora stepped inside, the energy field behind her shimmering with warning. "You are disrupting my ship." Vance raised an eyebrow. "That feels like an exaggeration." "At most, I'm an inconvenient hallway roamer. Like a vending machine that eats your credits." She gestured to X-17, which projected a small series of video clips into the air. Low-voiced conversations. Guards whispering. Engineers laughing. Tiny flickers of disorder. It was spreading. She stepped closer. "Your words have reached further than you intended," she said, her voice like a dagger wrapped in silk. Vance let out a low whistle. "Wow. I mean, I knew I was charming, but this is next level." She didn't smile. "You are beginning to undo centuries of structure." He shrugged. "Then maybe your structure wasn't as solid as you thought." That struck her harder than she liked. Her shoulders stiffened, just slightly. She had spent lifetimes sculpting fear into a weapon. Into an empire. And now? A man with nothing but a crooked grin and an attitude was unraveling it with jokes. She took a breath. Controlled. Even. "Tell me," she said, her voice tight but measured. "What do you want, human?" Vance blinked. "You mock my role. You refuse to yield. You inspire disorder without lifting a single weapon." Her eyes locked with his. "What is your goal?" Vance was silent for a long beat. Then, slowly, he pushed off the wall and stepped forward, eyes steady. No grin. No quip. "I want you to remember," he said quietly, "that control isn't the same thing as power. And fear only works until someone laughs in its face." He paused. "And if even one person laughs, others start to wonder why they were afraid in the first place." Zalora didn't move. Didn't speak. But in the stillness between them, something shifted again. Not in the ship. Not in the air. In her. Then he grinned. "I don't know," Vance said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "Maybe I just think, you could be something more." Zalora froze. It was subtle. A flicker in her posture, a fractional stillness in her breath. But inside, something cold uncoiled in her chest. Not fear. Doubt. And that terrified her more than any rebellion ever had. For centuries, she had ruled with iron certainty. She had drowned empires in fire and reduced civilizations to ash for the crime of dissent. Her name was spoken in whispers across 1,000 star systems, synonymous with obedience. With control. But now, standing in front of one unarmed, insufferably clever human, she felt the foundation of it begin to tremble. Elias Vance had no army. No strategy. No weapons. Just words. Humor. And a refusal to treat her like the god empress the galaxy believed her to be. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. White diamond with center dot. The command deck of the Doombringer was silent. Not the disciplined, orderly silence of a military fleet poised for war, but something else. Something heavier. Something unfamiliar. Hesitation. Her warlords, towering, brutal, loyal to a fault, stood in formation awaiting her command. But she could feel it radiating from them, the doubt. The unease. They had all seen the reports. Watched the subtle shift unfold in the ship's corridors like a contagion. Vance's words had spread like a virus. And now, her empire, immaculate, unyielding, had been infected. She turned toward the war map hovering in the center of the command deck, its projections flickering in crimson and gold. A red beacon pulsed in the Tarasi sector. Rebellion. Small. Insignificant. A spark she could extinguish without effort. Normally, she wouldn't hesitate. Normally, she would deploy the fleet, reduce the planet to memory, and make a brutal example of them. But as she stood there, considering the familiar path, she felt his eyes on her. Vance leaned casually against a nearby console, arms crossed. "Let me guess," he said, tone light, but eyes sharp. "You're about to rain hellfire on a bunch of terrified colonists who just want to live free." Classic evil overlord move. She didn't respond. Because that was exactly what she had planned to do. "That stuff works," Vance continued, "until it doesn't. Fear? Sure, it's effective. But it's a garbage long-term strategy." Her gaze snapped to him, hard and burning. "You believe you know better than me?" He gave a half-shrug. "I don't know. But I know this, if fear really worked, you wouldn't be standing here right now, doubting yourself." The silence that followed was seismic. Her warlords glanced uneasily between their Supreme One and the man who dared speak to her like she was human. Zalora's jaw clenched. She could feel it, the weight of centuries pressing down on her shoulders. Conquest. Control. Legacy. All of it balanced on a single impossible choice. And then, finally, she turned. "Commander," she said, voice low and deliberate, "hold position." The entire command deck went still. Korak, her fleet's executioner, twitched at her side. "Supreme One?" Her eyes didn't leave the map. "I said, hold position." The words felt foreign. Unnatural. Her fleet had never held. They advanced. They dominated. They crushed. But now, for the first time in her reign, they would wait. Because of one man. Elias let out a slow, impressed whistle. "Well, damn. Guess the unthinkable finally happened. The evil overlord got a conscience." She turned, fixing him with a look that could melt steel. "Do not push your luck, human." He grinned. "What, too soon?" White diamond with center dot. The galaxy wasn't prepared for peace. The Tarasi rebellion had braced for annihilation. They had dug trenches, readied farewells, prepared to become martyrs. Instead, there was silence. No warships. No orbital strikes. Just a single transmission, broadcast across their systems from the Doombringer itself. Zalora's voice. "I will not destroy you. I will not rule you. The Dominion is changing. If you choose to fight, fight. But you will no longer be fighting against me." That moment shattered the galaxy's perception of power. And it remade everything. White diamond with center dot. Elias Vance leaned back in a chair far too expensive for someone like him, boots kicked up on a priceless alien table in Zalora's private chambers. He nursed a glass of something dangerously potent and definitely not approved for human biology. Across from him, Zalora stood with her arms crossed, an expression hovering somewhere between disdain and reluctant amusement. "Just to be absolutely clear," she said icily, "this is not a permanent arrangement." Vance smirked. "Ah, come on. We make a great team. The redeemed overlord and the roguish human who saved her soul. Classic." She pinched the bridge of her nose. "I should have vaporized you when I had the chance." "But you didn't," he pointed out, raising his glass. "No," she admitted, exhaling. "I didn't. Because somehow, this maddening, reckless, ridiculous man had done what no fleet, no uprising, no enemy had ever accomplished. He had changed her. She had built an empire on fear, believing it was the only language the galaxy understood. And yet, Elias Vance had strolled into her flagship with nothing but charm and a refusal to kneel, and made her question everything. She still didn't understand him. Not fully. But maybe, she thought, that was okay. White diamond with center dot. Epilogue. A new legend took root. Word spread like wildfire. The Supreme One no longer ruled through terror. The Doombringer, once the dread symbol of dominion control, became something else entirely. It still cast a long shadow. But now, it protected instead of conquered. And Elias Vance? Some called him a fool. A fluke. A lucky anomaly who stumbled his way into history. Others called him a revolutionary. The man who laughed in the face of fear, and won. As the Doombringer drifted through the stars toward a future no longer written in blood, Solora stood at the viewing deck, arms folded. "You're going to be insufferable about this, aren't you?" Vance grinned beside her. "Oh, absolutely. And for the first time in centuries." Solora smiled.